And our top story tonight is about the fate of this man, Kilmar Abrego Garcia, who has been stuck in a foreign prison where the Supreme Court already ruled he should not be, and where the Trump administration admits, when you look at this type of treatment of prisoners there, that this is something that's happening to him by, the Trump folks admit, was a mistake, that he was mistakenly sent there. And our top story is about how that country's leader now, El Salvador President Bukele, is helping President Trump effectively defy the new Supreme Court decision. Now, the story, if you follow the news, you've probably heard about it, has been consuming the United States as a flashpoint in Trump's aggressive deportation efforts, including those that they admit are mistaken. But as you see on your screen, that long-running story ran right into the White House scheduled today, these two men meeting. And El Salvador is following Trump's playbook and echoing his administration's claim that now this matter is and must only be, they claim, up to El Salvador. In other words, while the Supreme Court ruled against Trump and said he must follow a judge's lower court ruling that basically requires the man's return, I can get into the details and the wording on that in a minute, but it basically said you have to return him out of this mistake, sent to a foreign prison he shouldn't be in. But Trump's aides want to hide behind El Salvador and claim they suddenly have no power to do anything about this. So before I show you more of what happened today, and we will show you what people are saying, including the administration, I want to give you, as we try to do around here, the facts and evidence. That claim that there's nothing they can do and it's up to El Salvador is legally weak because administrations often face court rulings requiring diplomacy or foreign policy work to right a wrong. And I'm showing you Trump with the tariff sign because it is factually dubious. Whether you like, dislike, or are neutral about Trump's approach to presidential power, it is not exactly meek and shy. Trump is literally waging a trade war built on his belief that his administration can make other countries do things, that he has this power, not that he's powerless to affect anything anywhere. In fact, he says he can do that whether those countries like it or not. Just as this entire deportation case began, famously or infamously, but began with Donald Trump wielding those powers to deport those people off those planes to El Salvador. So that's the context. Factually dubious, legally dubious. Here is how you're going to hear this dodge playing out.
That's up to El Salvador if they want to return him. That's not up to us.
How can I return him to the United States? Like I smuggle him into the United States, or what do I do? Of course, I'm not going to do it. It's like, the question is preposterous. How can I smuggle a terrorist into the United States? I don't have the power to return him to the United States.
Fact check, false. There are established, very detailed protocols for the legal passage of individuals between countries. Even if you're not an immigration expert or brushed up on your visa policies or a lawyer, you probably have that general sense, right? You can kind of detect that what you just heard there doesn't sound very true. Indeed, we have protocols for routine tourism and migration. That's people coming back and forth. But when you get into the more admittedly complicated scenarios, we still have protocols for them as well. Extradition of defendants or detainees like this individual. We have exactly what happened in this case. The U.S., of course, initially worked with El Salvador to transfer these people. And today's White House display showed how the Trump administration may use a mix of defiance, legally, bad faith, a type of dishonesty, and then its own brand of foreign policy to try to get another country to claim that this is a kind of a catch-22. So you have two leaders in charge of two different places, jurisdictions we call it legally, claiming neither of them can do the thing. They're both suddenly powerless. They can't do what the court ordered. And what did the court order? The Supreme Court upheld a lower court ruling that was largely against the Trump administration. But the Supreme Court also left a crack in that ruling. It stated that the lower court order should be followed, but with some deference to a president's foreign policy power, with the pursuit of facilitating Garcia's return. Now, I can tell you usually, and in fairness to both parties, usually this happens in both political parties. Whoever controls the White House, the DOJ would then try to do that thing, try to facilitate the person's return. But these are not normal times. In fact, if you follow the news closely, you might even have a vague memory of this. The Supreme Court issued that ruling late in the 6 p.m. hour. Breaking news. And our coverage at that time keyed in on what's now happening, how yes, it was a ruling against the Trump administration, but the way it was worded meant that a bad faith administration could try to exploit the court's language and turn it into a loophole. It's a point that in our coverage I discussed with former prosecutor Ankush Kardor. The Trump administration, or potentially any lawyer acting in bad faith, could say, quote, we'll try to facilitate for a few years while he does rot away in a foreign prison.
You know, that's my worry, quite honestly, because you're right. If I were on the receiving end of an order like that, I would expect to advise the client that they need to get this done as quickly and expeditiously as possible.
Exactly. That if you were being fair, you'd say, well, the Supreme Court's ordered you to fix the mistake, do it, and try to do it fast. But if it wasn't written in that binding way, as I mentioned, a bad faith, dodging approach could lead to a different result. Here we are 4 days later, and that is what the administration is basically doing and admitting in public, from the president on down. DOJ lawyers laying it out in new filings that they brazenly view the entire ruling, which was unanimous, by the way, as a suggestion. They don't view it as a binding legal obligation to make the return happen, and that the ruling, they claim, only requires Trump officials to admit Garcia into the country if he makes it back from El Salvador. That's quoting from those lawyers. Politico's headline tells the story. They contend they have no duty to return illegally deported man to U.S. Now, what is that? Again, I try to keep it very direct and real with you. This was foreseeable in the sense that lawyers, myself and Kardor, when we were talking about it the moments after the ruling came out, it was foreseeable that this could be a bad faith effort. And what we foresaw is happening. And the words I just read to you from the DOJ, we don't even have an obligation, is a formulation that all but taunts the high court. Because a prisoner is obviously not going to stroll back on his own the way they wrote it. Oh, he would just return somehow. DOJ does state that the individual is still alive and in prison, but offers no other details, although a judge is demanding daily updates, and there will be more hearings on that. So, here we are. Now, it's not all gloom and doom for the rule of law, although it's not a sunny day either. You take together what happened today, what I'm reporting to you, and on the one hand, we're still in a situation where the Supreme Court just ruled against Trump unanimously for holding this line. On the other hand, the way the Supreme Court ruled left this foreseeable avenue for a bad faith administration to duck the clear purpose of the order, which is to fix the mistake, to get the guy out of the prison that he's in mistakenly. And by the way, remember, it doesn't matter what you think about different individuals or your immigration policies. Some people think there should be much tougher immigration enforcement in the U.S. Some people think it should be more lax. But whatever you think about that stuff, policy, ideology, it is wrong to grab someone and send them to the wrong place, leave them in a foreign prison, admit it was wrong, and say, we're just going to let them rot there. I don't know who out loud would say that's the good idea policy of their side or their administration. Now, whatever the court's reasoning, an administration that gets away with this kind of thing or these ploys will be incentivized to do so again, to duck future rulings. And we are just in the beginning of this second term. So that risks further, potentially larger legal crises. And while there are hard, complex cases in law or immigration or many topics, this isn't one of them. I will remind you, the administration admits they made a mistake, what they call this administrative error in deporting Garcia to the wrong place. He's in the wrong prison. He's in the wrong country. So no one debating the case claims he's where he should be. And if the high court cannot effectively wield its legal powers to return one person in the wrong place that everyone agrees was a mistake, how will it maintain the rule of law on the harder cases or things involving even more people? Imagine if the claimed mistake was not sending Garcia to the wrong country, but picking up the wrong person entirely, or deporting an innocent American citizen to a foreign prison. If that happened under today's legal position held by the Trump administration, the DOJ could claim they still have no obligation to fix it, because that's the legal argument they're making, that it's up to the other country. Don't say we didn't warn you. Indeed, in that same ruling against Trump, after Chief Justice Roberts' section, Justice Sotomayor warned about exactly that. U.S. citizens could be, quote, taken off the streets, forced onto planes, History is no stranger to such lawless regimes, but this nation's entire system of laws is designed to, quote, prevent, not enable their rise. She was warning that if you allow this stuff for some, it can happen to others, and those others could be American citizens. Now, I'm not reading you some alarmist critique or op-ed. That is the quote, the jurisprudence of a serious judge based on the current filings and evidence she has about what the Trump DOJ and immigration enforcement authorities are doing. The justice, she is assessing what Trump actually says and does, which is a judge's job, right? She's not ignoring his literal statements like so many bankers or political apologists. And Trump has floated many extreme and unlawful plans only to later pursue them. Maybe not all of them, but many of them. And today, we're weaving this all together for you as best we can. Today, the president referred to a version of doing what Justice Sotomayor warned about, what I just read you. And before I play this for you, I want you to know what's happening out there, but the context is this would be illegal. It is what she warned against. And now he's talking about it, trying to seize power to send potentially American citizens to that notorious El Salvadorian prison.
I just asked the president, it's this massive complex that he built, jail complex. I said, can you build some more of them, please? We always have to obey the laws, but we also have homegrown criminals. I'd like to include them in the group of people to get them out of the country.
Quote, I'd like to include them, reference to the homegrown criminals, American citizens, people here, and get them out of the country. Now, Trump says he wants to obey laws and then talks about what he'd like to do, a plan that would disobey laws.